Hello, everybody. So today's lesson is going to be for Tuesday, March 31st. It is the last day of the month, and your bell ringers are due today. You should have 12 bell ringers for March, so get them done. If you're missing any, go ahead and check the live agenda under pages on Canvas to catch up on those bell ringers, and then turn them in because Friday is our last day before our spring break, which really isn't kind of like a spring break, but you don't have to do schoolwork, but you still have to stay home. So anyway, get that stuff done before our spring break. So turn in your bell ringers. You have a bell ringer today. There's a couple questions. By a couple, I mean a lot because I can't stop. You know this. Answer the question, then turn it in. Get that done. Okay, so let's recap some of the information that we talked about yesterday. We did yesterday slides 10, 11, and 12. We have some causes and effects of the Cold War. We have talked about ICBMs and an arms race. So like arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union, that comes in handy because you don't want to fire a weapon. Meaning like I don't want to attack the other person because they have the equal strength to attack me. And if I don't completely destroy them that first time, then they can completely destroy me that when they retaliate. And that is mutually assured destruction. So that is MAD, M-A-D. I looked at some pictures. ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missiles, those are ones that you can put in an airplane. And so you're just constantly in the air with your arsenal, and it's on the move to find your enemy or attack your enemy. So today we're doing slides 13 and 14. Again, I'm looking at mine right here. You have two vocab words on slide 13. It is titled nuclear bombs. And the vocab words are hydrogen bomb and deterrence. Okay. So a couple things. The hydrogen bomb is so much worse than the atomic bomb. If you remember from last unit, to end World War II, we dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan, the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we, as a country, kept going. And we made a hydrogen bomb. And a hydrogen bomb is so much worse. I'm going to read right here. Hydrogen bomb, a new type of bomb that would get its power from fusing together hydrogen atoms. Fusion is the same process that creates the energy of the sun and the stars. So casual. I think that we need to talk about this because I told you this yesterday that I have a fear. It's a rational fear of just like we have casual nuclear weapons just chilling, and that's scary, and it has the capability to destroy countries. This is a big thing. Having the energy of the sun and the stars in a hydrogen bomb. Why? And we've talked about this since when we were talking about the Industrial Revolution, that we make things with technology that just destroys us or replaces us. Like with a plow, we just replaced farmers. Okay, so we do things as a race, as a human race. We create things to destroy ourselves or to replace ourselves. The atomic bomb was splitting atoms. Now we're fusing them together, which would create a blast hundreds of times more powerful than the atomic bomb. Good Lord. Good Lord. Oh, yes. When we tested the hydrogen bomb, like I said, either last video or a couple videos ago, we would test it in the middle of oceans. Like the United States just owns clusters of islands in the middle of the ocean. And we would test the hydrogen bomb out there and just completely vanish. The islands would be completely gone, no, non-existent whatsoever, because of the energy and the power and the strength. And so when the Soviets found out that we were developing this weapon and we had this weapon, they started to get a little fearful, rightfully so, and they started to, institute more spies and then start really vamping up their scientific program because we're in an arms race. So they are going to actually get ahead of us, which we're going to talk about on the next slide. The Soviets are going to make huge advancements in science, and they're going to beat us for a while in the arms race. So the H-bomb put us ahead of the Soviets, and then they ended up getting ahead of us like I said, once they saw that what we had, they were like, oh, no, not good, not good. So they started to get ahead of us. Deterrence is, okay, that's the definition. Deterrence is the development of or maintenance of military power to deter or prevent an attack. So this would be somebody like North Korea, or even in Russia, having those military parades. Like, in North Korea, when they started doing these military parades, it was kind of like we were skeptical, like, are those even real? Like, we couldn't have military parades when President Trump wanted to a few years ago because he was advised that our grounds like wouldn't be able to carry them because they're so incredibly heavy. So demonstrating that you have weapons like that, it's a threat. So you are showing the world that I have all of these weapons, and you're doing this to try to deter or prevent somebody from attacking you. Like, hey, don't mess with me because look what I have. And if you mess with me, then we will retaliate with the weapons that I have. That's deterrence. Okay. Moving on. Slide 14. You'll see in the corner up there, I have a picture of Sputnik. That is Sputnik. I believe we talked about Sputnik, or you should have talked about maybe Sputnik. If you were in my class, we talked about Sputnik last year. That is a vocab word, and satellite is a vocab word. Okay, so nuclear energy. Actually, I think, was it at the end of last school year? Some states use nuclear power plants, and we, in the state of Ohio, I think we had 2 nuclear power plants, and I think it was like voted on and at the state house, and we're closing our 2 nuclear power plants. A lot of people are really, really, really scared of nuclear power plants because of past experiences in certain countries, right? Like of just like nuclear plants exploding, because that's nuclear energy, and then you have radiation. So I'm fairly certain that we decided that we were going to close our 2 power plants because you have to live a certain distance away, or you would like to live a certain distance away. So at this time in the 1950s, right, which is after World War II, we start using nuclear energy to power things. And that first paragraph says that we used it to power a submarine. Also, this was really efficient for us too, because like for those of you that went on the submarine last year on the field trip, we found out that it didn't go very fast, which is understandable. You're carrying weapons and torpedoes that are very heavy, but when it's powered by nuclear energy, you don't have to stop to refuel constantly, and it also travels a little bit quicker than a normal submarine. So that's going to help us a lot. Nuclear energy, it is a energy source that is very powerful, and like water and not water, oh my gosh, oil and like fossil fuels and stuff, like and coal, like we will run out of that. So with this kind of stuff, we won't, and like water, we won't run out of, and like solar energy and wind energy and stuff. So it's just a different type of energy. Nuclear power was put to use for peaceful purposes. Nuclear power plants in the United States began to produce electricity for homes in the 1950s. So it's gonna be helpful for a while, but then people started to get scared of them because of the accidents and the explosions that have occurred because of it. So there's some unintended consequences with that for sure. So Sputnik. Sputnik is a satellite, and we think of this stuff today like things in space, like it's just such a normal thing. But I want to clarify that, going into space was an incredible feat. How do you get there, right? Like, step 1. First of all, what is space? And then 2, how do you get there? Like, there's no oxygen up there. So you are, as a country, in this arms race, trying to figure out how do you beat your enemy. And what the Russians decide to do is move this to space. Now, this is scary because once you're up in space, you have the whole world underneath you, right? And you can just circle around space wherever you want to go, and you can drop weapons, whatever. We don't know what they're going to do. You don't know what happens up in space. If you are a normal everyday citizen, and people are in space right now in the International Space Station, what are they doing, right? Today, there are rules and there are policies and morals and things that you have to follow. And science today, depending on, what it is, unless you're like a secret mad evil scientist or something, for like NASA and stuff, they're there for education and they're there for exploration, right? But that wasn't a thing yet. The Russians, we don't know what they're going to do. It's not like we can just trust them right away. So the fact that they can put a satellite, which is Sputnik, that picture, up into space, what are you doing? What's your goal? Are you going to hurt us? Are you doing this for the betterment of mankind? And if we're looking at the Russians, we already know the answer. The answer is no, right? So what are you doing with that? And satellites today like are floating around in space. They help us with like GPS and stuff, and just like locating things. We also have like rovers and stuff on planets, the Mars rover, just to kind of like see what the atmosphere is like, and then also what the ground is like. You know, living on Mars and stuff like that. Like that's just kind of an idea of that's the new frontier is space, and we're going to talk more about that too. But what is it? What is space? Honest to God, like what is it? Space is another thing that it's like I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. Not a fan of any place that doesn't have any oxygen. So anyway, Sputnik was the size of a basketball and it weighed 200 pounds. And we in the United States were like, what the heck are you doing? What is that? Are you going to harm us? So the Soviets also eventually launched Sputnik 2 with a dog inside. It was the first living creature to orbit Earth in space. The dog actually did not survive. These launches caused great concern to the United States. To many Americans, it signaled that the Soviets had surpassed American scientists, which they did. They put something in space and were able to gather information about what space is like. Again, this seems so normal for us because we were born in a time when space was a normal thing. But in the 1950s, no one had been in space. No one had thought of putting anything in space. I mean, you thought of it, but like, could you actually do it during their lifetimes? Like, of course, you look up at the sky and you're like, wow, that's really cool. Like, great. Or you see like a shooting star. That's nice. But I would have never have thought in the 1950s that somebody could be put into space or something could be put into space, right? Like today I can call anybody. I can FaceTime on whatever. That's great technology. It's incredible. This technology is amazing. It still amazes us today that you can put something in space and send information back. You could put a human in space and they could talk to you. They could talk to you. It's wild. It's wild. It's amazing science. That is amazing science right there. So the Soviets are winning in this arms race, which is eventually going to be called the space race. So we have two things going on here. We have the arms race with nuclear weapons, and then we have the space race with objects in space and satellites. So we have two races with the Soviets: arms race with nuclear weapons, space race with satellites and people going into space. So 1958, the United States establishes NASA, which is just that their job is to focus on space. NASA is still around today. They have moonwalks and they send people still up in space. There was somebody who just like made it a year in space, and then a woman went up and she's completing her year in space. So we're still doing that, and we still work with other countries in the International Space Station, like a bunch of countries that we collaborate with. They have a bunch of their own astronauts in the International Space Station, so you can just like be chilling with somebody from Japan or something like that in the International Space Station, which is pretty cool. We also work with the Russians today in the International Space Station as well, because they're still very good at space and science. So we work with them as well. So two things. We have an arms race, nuclear weapons. We have a space race, which we're actually going to talk more about tomorrow with the Soviets, because they have launched Sputnik, and Sputnik is the reason why we have the educational system we have today, because we were like, oh God, the Russians are smarter than us. We need to push math and science hard because that we cannot let them win. We can't let them win. So this is why we focus a lot on math and science, and we have those core subjects, and why it's so important for us to know these things is because of Sputnik. So Sputnik is the reason why we have the educational system that we have today, because we freaked out because they did something before us, and that is not okay. Okay, guys, don't forget your summary. Turn in your bell ringers. I'll see you tomorrow.